by Judge Chabria. Honestly, I do know that you have to be a little bit, he's particular about, I think, wanting how he wants his bail applications. I do know that, you know, his primary concern initially was women, you know, and lack of criminal history, and now he's reviewing the other applications. So, you know, I think that, of course, I think advocacy and, you know, speaking out, I think, is helpful. So I guess I don't want to deter that. I just don't know what effect that would have on Judge Chabria, though. I can't speak to that. So.
I personally think it's a good idea to speak up, and I mean to have it's reaffirming that what he's doing is aligned with our values.
Yeah.
So I don't see any harm to it.
I don't know, if I was a judge, I'd have a hard time sleeping at night knowing folks were risking their lives for a crime that's death penalty worthy here. It's not a crime, I would say, even, right? Like my point is that the punishment doesn't fit the charge, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure the audience knows that they can ask questions from there's a chat box on your Zoom where you could type your questions, and we can go ahead and answer them. And we've got one coming here from Nadia. Has ICE continued to round up and detain people during the shelter-in-place order? If so, do you have any numbers on this? And is there any way you've seen community help protect and organize against ICE during the pandemic? Great question, Nadia. Thank you.
I only know that they did announce that they were not going to be arresting people in your hospitals or anyone seeking medical care, because that was getting to be a real concern about whether people were even going to get themselves checked out. So they're not rounding people up there. Maybe Sean or somebody else on those. I don't know any specific numbers, but I had heard anecdotally because of that, and because there are fewer ICE agents on it. You know, everyone's trying. There's a lot of sheltering going on. That there has been a decrease, but there's still enforcement activity. It's still going on.
Yeah, I guess one update I had, I'm on a weekly detention call. I'm just looking at the notes, is that, so there's two detention facilities that the San Francisco Immigration Court operates or is a jurisdiction under, is Yuba County and Mesa Verde in Bakersfield. And it looks like Yuba County, there's only 5 new people per week coming in, where Mesa Verde, there's certain dorms there that were at near capacity. So some of this information may be a little bit outdated by a week or so. I did read an article saying that ICE did say that during the pandemic that they were going to loosen their enforcement actions. And I did have a client come to me where he is not detained, but he was finishing a sentence from jail. And I was surprised actually that he got transferred to ICE custody, but they actually did release him. So that was surprising to me and actually nice to kind of see, because they could have actually detained him under a mandatory detention statute that they refused. They didn't actually, they just let him go. So he'll still have to fight his case, but he'll be non-detained. So that was nice to kind of see, honestly. And I think that has to do with COVID, because definitely pre-COVID, they would have detained him very quickly. So I think that enforcement is down a little bit, but they are still doing it though. So.
I want to make sure that we're giving
I-9 audits, right? They launched
No, Julie, go ahead. I actually do have a question about I-9's.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, I know. Gosh, I'm gonna have to reboot here. Yeah, and so Noel has to answer again. I'm just saying that there was in March when we were full on, like knowing it's a pandemic, hundreds of, like actually it looks like we're not sure how many thousands of employers got the, it's called the notice of inspection and an audit. And then they have to respond just when they can't even be in an office for those who had paper, right? But, and they did get eventually a 60-day extension on it, but of course now that time is blown and it's just still hanging over them. And it was astounding to us that they made that a priority, just as employers are coping with all this other stuff. But they want to keep up their numbers because they're really proud of the numbers last year of, there was a 4-fold increase of I-9 audits, that form you fill out to prove your work authorized. Within 3 days of hire, there was a fivefold increase supposedly in 2019, and they wanted to kind of keep on that trajectory. So they had them queued up, and they're very easy to send. That's something that the people of HSI, the division assigned to this area of investigation, they can, from the comfort of their home offices, just email out or mail out, whatever, that many notices. So so that to me is surprising, because we expected that there would have been some compassion there.
No,
that's what employers are supposed to do.
It sounds like that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the political nature of all this, and Donald Trump and fluffing those statistics for his own political gain too, right? I think there's a piece of that in this too. It seems like. Okay, so we have another question here. The pandemic is forcing all of us to reevaluate existing systems, from healthcare to education to the role of government in our lives. After we get through this pandemic, what is your hope for how ICE is evaluated? What does a more responsible version of the agency look like? Good question, Noah.
That's a really great question. Yeah. What is my hope for ICE? My hope is that ICE obviously will be reevaluated. I think a lot of it depends on who the new president's going to be in November, and hoping. I think if it's going to continue with the current administration, I think again, this is just my opinion and how I see it. I don't think it's going to be reevaluated for the better for immigrants. Honestly, I think that Trump is on a rampage, against immigrants, and then just basically our whole immigration system. So I don't know, because, ICE is a hand of the government. So if our own government can't even look at themselves right now with what's going on, I just don't see how they're going to reevaluate ICE, to be honest. But I am hopeful that we will hopefully get a new president. And I think at that point, I think there'll be a new evaluation. I do hope with Corona probably continuing, it sounds like, with different outbreaks happening, I'm hoping that the detention facilities will wind down for ICE, honestly, just because it's not sustainable if COVID is going to be rampant, until a vaccine is in place. So my hope it is that it would be reevaluated. So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just thinking, so as some people know, I started my law firm 25 years ago with a guy who was head of U.S. immigration when it was called INS under Reagan and Bush Sr., who, of course, oversaw the last amnesty. And it's funny because now people wouldn't remember, we looked at some of the wonderful things Reagan had said about immigrants, and they love him, but they wouldn't love him now. Anyway, so but back then, as those of you old enough to remember, it was one agency that oversaw the benefits, the kind of like, it's our job to help people get through all the way through to citizenship, naturalization, and their visas and all that. And also there's an enforcement arm, because you do have borders and you control it. But I would love to see us go back to an understanding that we are one agency. I mean, I never thought we should have split the say, and who comes up with a name like that? So anyway, this is, this idea that we are kind of working together to have the balance of security and recognizing the important role that immigrants play in this country. I think we didn't give the stat out, going back to the healthcare. We found that it was 30% of people working in healthcare and pharmaceutical and other fields that we're going to need to get through this pandemic are foreign born, and just way disproportionate contribution to so many areas of science as well. So having an organization that kind of keeps it all in balance. So some of the things they had, were, for example, the so-called catch and release policy, under Obama, not only just Obama, in fairness, the Bushes, Reagan, if you were working in this country for somebody for, I don't know, if you've just been here keeping clean for 15 years, you were never a target of the prior administration. They did not make a priority of you. In fact, we had rules about not going after people who've been certain distance from the border for a certain period of days, and then we have never in our years seen so many people saying, oh my God, crying because their gardener of 20 years was just rounded up. And people, we have a lot of here in the Bay Area executives being for their household staff, getting a disproportionate number of these SSA no match letters. We didn't used to use Social Security Administration as another weapon, you know. So I think there's a major regrouping of what is our philosophy, what's our purpose, and, you know, how do we tie, hopefully under another administration, how do we tie it all together?
Let me ask you a little bit. Let's push that concept for a minute. I think, you know, I like the idea of getting rid of ICE because they didn't used to exist in their form that they exist today. Like you mentioned, right? Before George W., ICE wasn't a thing. So politically, we've heard the hashtag abolish ICE. We saw it go viral. From a legal perspective, what would you, if you had the power to change the structure of ICE and either take it back to the way it was under INS or envision a future institution, how would you wave that magic wand? What would you create? What would you do?
Well, I would actually, Sean just wrote something. You guys seen the statement that their highest priorities are supposed to be promoting life-saving and public safety activities. You know, focus on the enforcement of public safety risks. I don't know if you can see what he said,
Yes.
but for people, you know, there was, you know, there's enforcement. I mean, they're also supposed to be helping people who are victims of trafficking. You know, I mean, they're supposed to be looking at who's being victimized and how can they keep everybody safe and bringing some order. You know, but like I say, it's all part of a holistic system. And I don't know if Sean can, is he open to talk or can you unmute? Because he, I think we'll be having a leadership role in some of this, we hope.
Sean, happy to, you're
Speak up, Sean, if you can. There you go.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Christina. Hello, everyone. Hi, Nima.
Can I just say, Sean and I used to serve on the Iranian American Bar Association board together. He's a great man, great human, great advocate. And thank you so much for joining, Sean.
Thank you, Nima. So I just wanted to point out the ICE statement. I mean, of course, I'm not argue with the fact that ICE is evil, but they did issue this statement on March 18 that they did change their priorities.
I'll be interested to see what the data shows.
Yeah, so this is the first two paragraphs of their statement from March 18 that I posted in the chat.
Thank you for doing that.
And I personally haven't heard of any enforcement that like before the COVID that was happening before COVID.
Sean is also an immigration attorney for folks who are wondering.
For many years.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, Sean. That's, I mean, I do know that there's all these statements out there, but you know, I just their words are not always in line with, I feel like, their actions. So.
Christina, if you could wave a magic wand, how would you reform ICE?
Gosh, I mean, honestly, if I could, I'd get rid of it. I'd definitely abolish it. Obviously, I'm not one for enforcement at all. I think, but I also know that just waving a wand and getting rid of enforcement is not really also the answer as well. I mean, there has to be some system in place. I am not the one. I think Sean might be better about this, or Julie, to speak to what might be great. But I think Congress needs to do something, and I do think that until Congress changes, I think that, you know. We're going to be stuck with ICE, but obviously I don't think having guns and detaining people is the way to go. I think that there has to be a more compassionate way of dealing with our system here. And but yeah, so that would be my wand would be to abolish it and to have a different system in place. So, but I don't have a solution though, unfortunately. I wish if I did, I would run for president or something. So.
Well, for one thing, you know, we have all these people stuck at the border, right? Who are like, we have 2 people in, you know, and so, and this again is something that historically unprecedented. but they could be deployed to help out with doing some, they could be retrained or repurposed for the credible fear sort of analysis. I mean, there are lots of things that you can do in the name of ferreting out, like who's a danger to society and who really needs to be here. But we're right now, of course, just in total violation of all international principles of asylum law. Have them help with that if we have these bodies.
Yeah, one thing I want to note that Julie just said is that also one thing with the COVID is also that they're denying asylum applicants at the border as well. So that's just horrendous to me that they're doing that, and children are being turned away, and so forth. So
yeah. So you asked what you can do. We have had a bunch of our paralegals and others go down sending. We can still bring shipments of goods. We're having all sorts of just supplies and clothing and food and all sorts of stuff. There's some great organizations helping those people out because they're literally stuck. Usually at the border crossings.
Sorry, let's say you wanted to get in your car and go down to San Diego, go down to the border. Can you walk us through how you would be able to actually provide supplies or donate anything to folks that are down there? How can you help? Let's say you were able to get down there.
So some really incredible people I work with who had organized this, and I just contributed money. But my understanding is they drove down. And has anyone else been to the border crossing near San Diego? Where you can literally just there's a turnstile you can walk across. So they just had a car that parked right as close as they could. Really a kind of a wagon like we used to take with our kids, and just kept loading it and taking it across. And then some people met them and just took it in because there's no rule against bringing food and supplies. I think my understanding is also organizations that will have cars. They're very good people from who are trying to help on both sides. So I believe it was a Mexican organization that partnered with the U.S. NGO. I can get the names of people.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The organization.
Noelle just asked a great question, and I responded with a quip, Noelle. Her question is, who holds the U.S. accountable for violating international asylum laws? And I responded, nobody. But if there are legal systems in place. You have the ICJ, you have the ICC, you have courts. How would someone go about holding the U.S. accountable? And why is the ultimate answer nobody?
Unfortunately, there is no body. That's at one point, I wanted to do human rights law, but then I got frustrated with doing it just because I felt that there was no body of enforcement to enforce human rights law internationally. So it's very frustrating. And so at least with immigration law, you at least had the courts within our state, within our country to enforce them. But international law, though, is really hard to enforce. Other than, public scrutiny and, I don't know, we're like ICC, International Criminal Court, but there's no body that does it, which is so frustrating. So I don't know if Sean or Julie or Nima, if there is another.
Well, the ICC, right, exists. The Rome Statute exists to enforce international criminal laws. I don't know if violation of asylum laws would go under the jurisdiction of the ICC. You'd have to petition the prosecutor. I don't know if the statute actually would cover that. But ultimately, the U.S. would have veto power over what cases go before the ICC. So that wouldn't be really a forum. The International Court of Justice has generally been used to settle disputes between nations. So in theory, maybe Mexico or I guess in theory, somebody could take the United States, another nation state could take the United States in front of the ICJ. And generally the punishment would be monetary, but the mechanisms don't necessarily exist, really. And I just don't see Congress passing a law that would hold a federal agency accountable. I don't even think they could.
If I may jump in,
please.
Yeah, the U.S. doesn't even abide by, as far as I know, has never abided by international asylum law. It has its own U.S. asylum law that we would be lucky if it abides with that. This administration is not even abiding by U.S. asylum law. And it's up to individuals and organizations to take cases to federal courts and have the federal courts force the US government to abide by its own asylum law, by the US asylum law.
Yeah.
I feel like,
go ahead.
It's quite clear. I mean, I think if it was Biden and it were like the Obama-Biden administration, I think we can expect a very different experience, obviously. So the most important thing we can do is vote, of course.
Yeah. I want to, so we're 3 minutes to closing. I want to talk about some ways folks can get involved. I have one more question that it's still in my mind about our DACA friends, our DACA brothers and sisters. On the Immigrant Rights Commission that I sit on, we've heard from folks forming co-ops so that folks that may lose DACA status can still work through the 1099 independent contractor model, or through creating their own businesses and providing services as like a third-party vendor. And the purpose behind that is because, if you lose your DACA status, you won't be able to get verified. The I-9 verification process won't go through, right? So DACA was supposed to give you employment status, the ability to be a W-2 employee for an employer. But one way around it that I've heard, because folks have come and presented to the Immigrant Rights Commission, is through this 1099 tax structure, that the independent contractor model. Can Christina, Julie, Sean, can you speak to that? Is that a viable alternative? If yes, you can still get deported because you lose legal status, but we've got a lot of folks that don't have legal status that are still working, right? Is the IC independent contractor model viable?
I think it's viable in the sense that it does avoid the DACA recipient to avoid I-9 procedures. So you're not misrepresenting yourself to an employer, and then the employer also doesn't have to make a decision between employing somebody who doesn't have work authorization anymore versus them getting potentially in trouble for doing that. So I do think it's a workable solution, yes. But just to be clear, again, they're not really work authorized. So, but it definitely gets around the hurdles of the I-9 process, and does give, as an employer too, I don't know, and maybe Julie can speak to this more, or Sean, is what requirement the employer for who's employing an independent contractor, what their responsibilities are in terms of verifying them in terms of that. But I don't know. It is a potential way for DACA recipients to continue working. Yes. I just don't know the onus of the employer, how much scrutiny they have to put into that.
Well, no, there is no question that an employer. So if it's an employer, somebody who already knows my status, then I have actual, not just constructive knowledge as the employer. So but Nima specifically asked about the independent contractor situation. So if somebody's working for me and then their status expired, and I know it because I have their I-9, going back to that, and then they say, hey, I formed a company with my buddies here. You're not hiring me, you're hiring my company. That employer, ICE is still, the government's still going to say that employer had knowledge that the person was unauthorized. But another, to your point, another employer might not.
Yeah.
And so it's one way. That's why I still, just for people's safety, and these people have families and stuff, I prefer looking, as crazy as it is, to, again, something like Canada, where you can, like, people who are working, we have some working as engineers, and they can get a work permit there in 2 years, in a couple of weeks. They'll be opening up the borders fairly soon. So, hopefully within a couple of months, you can get yourself there.
Yeah.
And what I was saying is that I'm seeing a lot of employers saying, I don't care if they work, people have proven under COVID they can work remotely, and I really want this person. And if our government's not smart enough to let me keep them in this status, then I'm going to find a way to get them in this other country that's going to be more welcoming. Facebook did this when they didn't get enough H-1B visas a few years ago, sent people to Vancouver thinking they could park them, and then people didn't want to come back. They were going to bring them back on the intercompany transfer visa. They're like, hey, it's pretty nice up here. I'm like,
That's actually
I'm a dual Canadian citizen.
That's fascinating. I hadn't heard about the Canada alternative, and that's actually
There are some risks there too, but not as risky as staying here legally, I think. Well, it depends again who's in office. So, because
yeah, no, that's fair. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so if you have any final questions, go ahead and drop them in the box. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's a minute after our closing time. So if you want to volunteer, one idea to put out there is the Latino Task Force on COVID-19. They do food giveaways every Tuesday and Saturday at 9 a.m. at 701 Alabama Street. So let me go ahead and type that in there for you if you're interested in volunteering. 701 Alabama Street at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays and Saturdays, 9 a.m. I already put that in there, and it's Latino Task Force. Okay, on COVID-19. Apologies if there's any spelling errors. Organizations to support. I'll type these in as well. If you want more information, you can contact Emma, emmak@gmail.com. But I'll put this in here. CareSend, California Immigrant Youth, Justice Alliance. I'm sorry, California Immigrant Youth Justice Alliance, Black Alliance for Justice Immigration. And we do have an upcoming event on May 28th, and it's titled Attacks on Reproductive Choice During COVID-19. Christina, Julie, do you have any other resources or volunteer opportunities, organizations that folks can support?
Yeah, I'm going to type, I did give Emma a list. I'm just going to, I just chatted some in there. I think some of them are repeats from you, Nima. Another one is Immigrant Legal Defense in Oakland. They would love donations. And yeah, so those are the organizations that I would just highlight for everybody if they're looking for places to donate or volunteer. And I just saw somebody list Noel, San Francisco Marin Food Bank. That sounds amazing. I think that's great.
That's Food Bank, absolutely.
And finally, I did have a update on the organization, or one of the many, but the one we worked with was the International Rescue Committee. You guys know rescue.org. They are doing a lot at the border right now.
That's fantastic. I put that in there too, Julie. Christina, Julie, I really want to thank you for joining today. I really appreciate your time today. We all do. Thank you so much for the work you do every day. Sean, thank you for hopping in and joining the conversation. Emma, thank you for organizing this. Noel, thank you for your support. Thank you, Babak. Thank you to the United Democratic Club board. I was supposed to record this event from the beginning. I think I hit record about halfway through, so we'll have about the second half of this program recorded, so my apologies there. But thank you all, and I look forward to talking and keeping the conversation going. Reach out to us. Sean also added Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society as another organization to support. Carlos added Border Angels. I love you too, Babak. And you know, this is the start of a conversation. We got to still get involved. This is an activist community, and we're all here to help folks protect our community and protect our folks who are in danger because of this president. So keep resisting, and thank you all, and love you all, and stay safe.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Take care. Bye.